أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله الذي أنزل على عبده الكتاب ولم يجعل له عوجا قيما لينذر بأسا شديدا من لدنه ويبشر المؤمنين الذين يعملون الصالحات أن لهم أجرا حسنا ماكثين فيه أبدا وينذر الذين قالوا اتخذ الله ولدا ما لهم به من علم ولا لآبائهم كبرت كلمة تخرج من أفواههم إن يقولون إلا كذبا فلعلك مرفقا وترى الشمس إذا طلعت تزاور عن كهفهم ذات اليمين وإذا غربت تقرضهم ذات الشمال وهم في فجوة منه ذلك من آيات الله من يهد الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن يجد له وليا مرشدا صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات
بر محمد وآل محمد صلوات. بآواز بلند صلوات. اے چاند کربلا کے تو نے تو دیکھے ہوں گے اترے تھے اس زمیں پر عرش بری کے تارے. اے چاند جلوگر ہے ہاشم کا چاند یہاں پر خیرات روشنی کی لے لیجیو یہاں سے. اے چاند اس زمین پر رکھیو ہمیشہ ٹھنڈک سوتے جو ہیں یہاں پر زہرا کے ہیں یہ پیارے. اے چاند تسلیم و سلسبیل و کوثر کے ہیں یہ مالک مارے گئے جو پیاسے اس نہر کے کنارے. اے چاند حر اور حبیب جیسے جاں باز اور احبا مارے گئے یہیں پر انصار شاہدین کے مارے گئے یہیں پر بے دردیو ستم سے. مسلم کے دونوں پیارے زینب کے دونوں بیٹے پامال ہو رہی تھی قاسم کی لاش رن میں عباس اور سرور چنتے تھے ان کے ٹکڑے بازو کٹے یہیں پر عباس سے با وفا کے اذن وغا نہ پایا پانی بھلا نہ پائے اس سرزمین پر گزرا سرور پہ یہ بھی صدمہ، سینے پہ کھائی برچی ہم شکل مصطفیٰ نے، پانی پلانے لائق محلقہ کو سرور، کیا ذبح حرملا نے، تیرے ستم لگا کے گردن چھدی پسر کی، بازو چھدا پدر کا دونوں تڑپ تڑپ کر، پیاسے جہاں سے گزرے اس بن میں ایک بچی، بابا کو ڈھونڈتی تھی، بکھڑے ہوئے پڑے تھے جب سر بری دلاشے، بازو بندھے یہیں پر پہلے پہل حرم کے، اس سرزمین سے نکلے سجاد سر جھکائے، شہزادہ جناحی مالک ہے کربلا کا، جس کس کی مجال آئے جب تک نہ وہ بلائے، اے چاند پہنچے ہیں کربلا میں جو لوگ سبط جعفر، اے کاش پھر مقدر ان کو یہ دن دکھائے، اے چاند کربلا کے، تو نے تو دیکھے ہوں گے اترے تھے اس زمین پر عرش بری کے تارے، اے چاند بر محمد وال محمد صلوات۔
Salam Alaikum. So as you guys know, inshallah, we'll be having this program up until August 20th, for second of till 12th of Muharram. Sorry, we'll be starting the program every day at 7:30 p.m. inshallah, with Quran recitation followed by Salam or Marsiya, then Asad Bhai's speech, and then we'll have Noha, and then we'll have Namaz Ba'ajamaat here as well. If you'd like to recite, please contact me or any Mahdi Youth brother, so we can encourage all the youths to come and recite and give our and present Bibi with our condolences. Al Hadi School is in collaboration with Mom and Tots, and they're having morning majalises every day at 11 a.m. Lunch is also served. Brother Hussain Mustahidi is giving the speech there. We are having the program in the hall every day. Please do follow all the protocols. Try to sit within your family within one box and try not to cross over, as limited capacity is granted within inbounds. With that, I would like to call Asad Bhai on the member. Bawazi Baland Salawat.
فاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين. صراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت. Discussions on terminology, istilahat, processes, concepts that have to be explained in the first 2 or 3 lectures. They're usually dry in nature, a little bit academic, and maybe not so practical, theoretical in nature. But they all come into play around the 5th or 6th of Muharram when I begin to take that little bit of the turn towards my thesis and my purpose. By the end of the night, you'll know exactly why I chose this topic, and I do choose all my topics very carefully, of course, as you know. And even the wording on the flyer I gave the team, I did not say human rights and Islam, I said human rights in Islam. There's a big difference, and I'll explain inshallah as the ashra goes on. However, before that, I have to explain a couple of things. Now, I choose what I say to the public in front of me wisely, and I know that this is my home community, and all of you, I think 85% are my family. And so I can say a lot of things in front of you that I can't say in front of other communities. And the first thing I want to mention to all of you is about this mimbar. The word mimbar, mim, nun, ba, ra. It's not mim, bara. That's mimbar. That's just English. Mim, noon, bara, mimbar comes from nabara in Arabic. Nabara means bulandi in Urdu, elevation. Mimbar becomes a place where elevation is expected. Isme makan, as they say in Arabic. that from this member you should, as the audience and the majma and the awam, expect some form of elevation to be delivered to all of you. Elevation meaning tools to elevate, wings to fly, concepts to flourish. If that's not happening, then of course we have to rethink things. Everyone that sits on this member is not somebody who should be sitting on this member. That's why you look at Imam Sajjad alayhi salatu wasalam, Allahumma salli ala. When addressing Yazid in his own Masjid al-Sham, he never referred to that as a member. He said, Takht Chubi, this plank of wood that this man sits on. Meaning what? That from this plank of wood and from the man sitting on that plank of wood, you can't expect any form of elevation or bulandi. Imam Jawad alayhi salatu wasalam, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. He has a very, very powerful hadith that I really want you all to follow me as I go through this hadith. It's scary for someone like me, but it's important for all of you as the awam and the listeners of these majalis. He says, Man asgha ila natiqan faqad abadahu. Very carefully follow me, please. He says, for the one who does asgha to a speaker, ila natiqan, natiq is a speaker. فَقَدْ عَبَدَهُ, they become the slave of that speaker. Slave, of course, doesn't mean in a worshipping capacity. There's influence there, there's impact there, right? Asgha is not the same as istima' or sama'a in Arabic, to listen. No, asgha is the one who listens and then follows what he heard or what she heard. So the hadith now starts off by saying, there's more to it by the way, starts off by saying that if you're sitting in a gathering and you are listening to a natiq, to a speaker, you're listening to him and you're following him, meaning that you're trying to apply what he now is saying to you on the member, فَقَدْ عَبَدَهُ, you become enslaved by that speaker in the most impactful way. And then the hadith goes on, فَإِنْ كَانَ نَاطِقًا عَنِ اللَّهِ فَقَدْ عَبَدَ اللَّهِ. If that natiq speaks of Allah, from Allah, takes you to Allah, فَقَدْ عَبَدَ اللَّهِ. You become a slave of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But then he says, وَإِنْ كَانَ نَاطِقًا يَنْتِقُ إِلَى لِسَانِ إِبْلِيسِ فَقَدْ عَبَدَ إِبْلِيسِ. If that natiq, if that speaker now speaks of satanic concepts, concepts made to divide the ummah, concepts made to empower men to do dhulm on their women, concepts meant to cut the knees of another alim or speaker, concepts that go against the marajeh, concepts that disunite the ummah, concepts that dismiss the youth of today. These are all satanic concepts. If that is from yantiqu ila lisani iblis, he's speaking from the direct tongue of iblis, faqad abada iblis. The awam, the majma, the audience now becomes what? The followers of iblis. If I have a right as a speaker up here, that you sit here, quietly listen to me, do your best to face me when you sit, right? Not on your phones looking at me, that's all my right as a speaker. You also have rights from me to you, that I deliver those contents that don't sway from the deen. I have nothing to deliver. I'm here as simply a wasila of the deen. Anyone who claims to have anything of their own should not be sitting on this mimbar. There's too much in the deen to present for us to add our minchi and masala to it. We don't need to. Present the deen as is. فَقَدْ عَبَدَ اللَّهِ. Then you'll have a nation that are the slaves of Allah. So my point to all of you is that as you begin this Muharram and Safar journey, and you go to the mukhtalif majalises, and you choose to sit in front of a speaker, choose wisely. Understand the impact of those words. Now don't get up right now and leave, please. Just, if you decide to not come back tomorrow, don't come back tomorrow. Bear with me as to today, inshallah. And we'll go, Salam ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now, having said that, when I begin to deliver content to my audience, I do so based on a number of things. Number one is what I believe to be those issues that are mubtala bih, meaning those things that are prevalent right now in society. And unfortunately, 3, 4, 8 ashras are not enough to discuss all these issues. Ashras, not majas, ashras. There's a lot of issues we have inside of our homes, our masajid, our communities. These are the days now to talk about these things. I mention this because there will be people who come to me directly, and there already has been, that why are you talking about these topics in the first 10 days? Just talk about Imam Hussain. Just talk about Abu Fazl Abbas. These topics are not meant for the first 10 days of Muharram. And the reality is that these topics are sometimes only meant for the first 10 days of Muharram. I won't get this majma after Ashura. And so it's imperative that all of you understand that this member is meant to put out the fires, not add to them. They're meant to bring families together, not break them. They're meant to inspire you, bring you hope, not tell you you're bound for the hereafter or the hellfire. Absolutely not. Given that discussion now, this discussion on human rights in Islam is a crucial one. Because for the past 20 years now, in a post-9/11 world, and yes, we're still feeling the effects of those planes in that tower, everything now has come zid sawal. Everything has now become a debate, from hijab to marji'ah to khums to even human rights. And the argument is that Islam does not have, never did have, a comprehensive human rights system in their deen. Never did. And there's people who have spent millions of dollars and hours of research to prove that point. That Islam does not believe in human rights, doesn't promote it, and the proof that they use sometimes is the state of our Islamic countries, quote unquote. And to a certain degree, they're right. But that's not the only ma'iyar and criteria. Right now, you look at, for example, the state of some of our Islamic countries, quote unquote, and yes, there's a lot of issues in terms of human rights in those issues, in those countries. You look at sometimes the state of Muslim households, a husband and a wife, and the amount of dhulm and oppression done inside of a marriage, done to children, done to parents, done to siblings, done to first cousins. All of that tells me that now it's gotten to the point where we start to believe that Islam doesn't have a human rights system. Because if they did, then we wouldn't see the state of the Muslim ummah or the Muslim family like we do today. Now, I used to think that maybe this was a generation of my parents. The way the deen was presented to them was in a very unique way. That was okay for that era. Right? My elders will often tell me that this idea of discussing anything with an alim was unheard of back then. That the moment that the alim comes down from the minbar and to ask him a question about his speech was not only unheard of, it was tantamount to punishment. He would summon your father and he would scold you in front of your father to teach this boy some manners. How dare he ask me any question about my lecture? That, of course, zamana is gone. That era is gone. Now I get stopped at Costco picking out fruit and they ask me a question. True story. Would you mind, I have a quick question? I said, sure, no problem. Help me pick out some anar and we'll go through the question together, inshallah. So my point is that I always believed that these discussions would happen in that generation, but now it's beginning to trickle into our generation. And the aftermath is very dangerous. Sometimes on this very issue of human rights, there are sisters who are leaving the deen, brothers who are announcing or denouncing the religion. And now they're doing it on social media. And sometimes being congratulated of their newfound freedom of the deen of Islam. Now we can sit there, we can blame others, blame this society, that country, that ism, this ism, but I think we have to look inside of our hearts and our backyard. We're not entirely innocent of this. And that's why for the next 10 nights now, I will dissect this topic in its entirety, to the best of my ability. To start off with, let's discuss some basic concepts of the deen. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The first thing that we have to understand is that the Holy Prophet came to introduce a Rabb al-Alameen and a Rabb al-Nas to the people. Understand the difference. He came to introduce a Rabb of the worlds and a Rabb of the human beings. There's a big difference now. Okay? You take the likes of Fir'aun. Fir'aun's Aqidah, Fir'aun's theology, Fir'aun's understanding of religion was not something that was rare, by the way. He believed in God. Fir'aun believed in God. But he believed in a God of all gods. Meaning what? That he believed that there's a God up there in the skies and the heavens as a sarparast, as a leader, as somebody who kind of signs the papers. But on the ground, everyday sort of actions, there has to be another God who has to kind of do the everyday domestic affairs. He believed himself to be that. He believed himself to be the God of Egypt. No matter how hard Nabi Musa tried to tell him, the same God of the Alameen is the same God of you and I as well. There's no difference. The Rabb al-Alameen is a Rabb al-Nas as well. He wouldn't accept it. So the Prophet came down to make all of us understand the same God that is powerful enough to create the heavens and the earth is the same God that gave us the inhale and exhale power that we have today. Same individual God is the same universal God. Okay? That's point number one. Point number two, the revelation given to the Holy Prophet in the form of the Quran was not something that God used to promote himself. Understand this very delicate point. The entirety of the Quran was made for and given to by all of humanity. This was not some sort of a marketing scheme by the Holy Prophet. Look how great I am. Nor was it some advertising scheme of God that God is the greatest. He didn't have to do any of that. Literally, the revelation of the Quran was made for mankind. In fact, the nucleus of the Quran is humanity. And the Prophet came to not only teach them the verses, but apply the verses in society. To make us understand that the deen is meant to do what? The deen is meant to be implemented inside of our life. Last night at Masumin Center, I discussed a breakdown of the discussion on the intellect inside of Islam. I talked about this taqsim bandi, right? This categorization of aqlim ma'ash, aqlim ma'ad, very carefully. Okay? I know these are boring terminology discussions, but I have to have them in the first a few nights. Aqlim ma'ash with a shin at the end, and aqlim ma'ad with a dal at the end. Aqlim ma'ash is that logic we use for everyday life. Okay? So for example, where to eat, for example, what to buy, for example, where to go on vacation, for example, which majlis to go to, for example, right? Those things that are kind of physical in nature are called aqlim ma'ash. Okay? We use our intellect to decide everyday mundane things. What clothes to wear, what cologne to buy, what to watch, what noha to put on in our car for the drive, whatever the case may be. Aqlim ma'ad is a metaphysical intellect. Those are decisions we make for ma'ad. Ma'ad meaning the day of judgment, the hereafter. Okay? So there is the intellect we use for our everyday life and the intellect we use for the hereafter as well. For example, getting up for salat, fasting in the month of Ramadan, mustahab fast, going for ziyat, going for hajj, sometimes choosing a spouse. All those have a aql ma'ashi impact to it. Okay, so far so good. Now, the kamal of a believer, the perfection and the oj and the summit of a believer is to make their aql ma'ash aql ma'ad. I love when my majma gets ahead of me. Aql ma'ash Aql, meaning what? Everyday mundane things have a ma'adi concept to them. Physical things are sprinkled with the metaphysical on top of them. That's hard. It's a lifelong battle. Right? It's the idea of taking the 5 classifications of any amal that we do, wajib, haram, makruh, mustahab, mubah, and reducing it down to 4. Removing the mubah from our list. Mubah means anything else that we do that does not fit the first 4 is mubah. Okay? Walking to the bathroom, putting on our pants, I don't know, combing our hair, for example, right? Brushing our teeth, mubah things, everyday things. Right? You can't really say that it's wajib to brush your teeth. No, not really. Or makruh, for example, no. But the beauty of a believer is that through the intention now, they have the ability now to remove the mubah, such that everything that they do and we do is either haram or mustahab or makruh or wajib. That's a lifelong process. Sometimes when we take the statement by Bibi Zainab, Salam Alaikum, Salawat ala Muhammad wa ala. As ma ra'aytu illa jamila, a very famous statement, a very powerful one that requires an entire ashra, I tell you. That I did not see anything but beauty. And a lot of ulama have done a lot of research and they have commented on this one statement. If I can use that statement for this purpose of ma'ashi and ma'adi, she saw Karbala was a very physical battle. There was blood, weapons, horses, tents, fire, all the elements of a war, physical. It's a very ma'ashi battle. But when asked to summarize the entire battle, she saw it through the lens of a ma'ad, of the hereafter. I saw beauty. I saw a man, his companions, his family give everything for the sake of God. So where we sometimes or me are stuck on the blood and the gory details and the water not being there and the trampling of the blood, those are all, of course, physical elements. Bibi Zainab saw nothing but the hereafter on the plains of Karbala. That's a level of maqam that we have to rise up to. I challenge myself and all of you to rise up to that level. But the beauty initially of the revelation of the deen is such that it was made for and run by all of humanity. Now, that's point number 2. Let's come to the issue at hand. Why do individuals now, like I said, in the past 2 decades now, why is it that they have argued that Islam does not have a human rights system? I'm not talking about outside the circles of Islam. These are Muslim writers, Muslim academics, Muslim philosophers that claim that we have to now lean on the West to teach us human rights. Now, in order to understand the crux of the issue, let's look at 2 terms. I'll throw a lot of terms at you guys, I'm sorry. One is universalism. One is cultural relativism. Let's understand these terms. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. What is universalism? It's a doctrine, it's a philosophical stance that there are certain concepts that have to be accepted as is by all. Globally, across the globe. West, East, male, female, black, brown, white, short, tall, you name it. Muslim, non-Muslim. Okay. And its birth is in the West. Okay. So essentially what the West wants to do is it wants to now infiltrate into different existing cultures that are non-Western and present its liberal viewpoint, its liberal worldview, and say, look, you have to now apply these principles because they are universal. Okay, and we're seeing that infiltration everywhere, everywhere. Oh, I remember my first and only Hajj a couple of years ago. I was so mad. I did my Hajj, I did my tawaf, I did my sa'i, I had a little bit of my beard cut. I was on a high. I was in front of the Kaaba. The first time I saw the Kaaba, I thought I was looking at the screensaver on my computer. I couldn't believe it. It looked fake to me. I was walking on the same zameen that the prophets before me walked, that the Imams walked. Safa Marwa, I was just on a high, and I left that masjid on a high, opened the doors, exited. First thing I saw was what? Golden arches. Golden arches. And somebody had the gall to ask me, do you want a Big Mac, Maulana? I said, no, thank you. And the problem lies in the fact that they take this universal code, and I'll expand on that a little bit more, and they measure each country in the world. And if your country, your practices do not measure up to our universal code, then you are in violation of human rights. The problem is that who made this code? 1948, those of you who have done a little bit of research on human rights, in 1940, in a post-World War II era, the US and France sat down at the table as the two head honchos and drafted up this UDHR, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Okay? And they said to avoid a third world war, we're going to now draft up this Universal Declaration. But if you read it, all of it now, it's beautiful on paper, but zero implementation on the ground. They take this UDHR in 1948, like I said, they measure every country, east to west, Muslim to non-Muslim. They look at Yemen and they measure. Look at Iran and they measure. Look at Iraq and they measure. If you don't measure up to their liberal viewpoint, then of course sanctions come about, invasion comes about, right? The robbing of oil comes about, attacks, war comes about, all on the idea that we are here to save the citizens from their corrupt ruler, based on our liberal worldview. This is what's referred to as today's universalism. Okay? It's imperialism. It's cultural imperialism, nothing more. To combat that is cultural relativism. There's another group that says, hold on, wait a second now. You can't sit there and draft up a universal declaration that has Western viewpoints in it. You can't sit there and tell me that you have the entire globe figured out, that you know the culture of the Afghani people, the Irani people, the Syrian people, the Pakistani people. No. Yes, there are certain things that are absolute. The right to live, of course. The right for resources and food and water and shelter and privacy and security, fine. But its implementation has to be culturally relative. Let the nation itself now understand the rights of its citizens. And because this battle now ensues, and because now there are some Islamic nations that are absolute sellouts and say that we're going to move away from the Islamic doctrine and adopt this Western liberation process, then of course this discussion is born. That, oh, because they and this Emirati and that kingdom and this country now has now taken the West to be the end all and be all. Thus that means because they are the image of Islam, Islam does not have human rights. Now that trickles down into our youth today. A lot of people ask me, why doesn't Islam talk about this issue and that issue and this issue? And by the way, it talks about all issues. The one thing that I really want to say to all of you as a bracket point is that yes, I know that growing up, maybe you've had a traumatic experience when it comes to Islam. I accept it. Okay? An impatient Sunday school teacher. Okay? A cranky scholar who came into town. Asked you, you asked him a question on the wrong day, and he snapped at you. A judging auntie in the center that talks about the fact that your hijab isn't right. You've gained too much weight. What's wrong with you? Or, your hair is too long. Why is that pierced? Why are your jeans too tight? All these things are there. So growing up now, we equate all of this now to the deen. I've had people tell me to my face, 24, 25-year-olds. I have this, this trauma when it comes to Islam. Any sort of word about Islam, namaz, prayer, masjid, mosque, any sort of word association with Islam, and I get this pit in my stomach. I get this fear. My BP goes up. I begin to sweat and shake. No word of a lie. 23-year-olds. And I get it. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. It does happen. But my challenge is that if you want to seek Islam, seek Islam. Because seekers will seek. Seekers will seek. Growing up in this very center, I didn't have the resources all of you have today. I didn't. There are many, many avenues of guidance out there for all of you to hold on to and take your way towards salvation. They'll make you forget about your traumatic experience from grade 4 Dinyat. There are many, many avenues out there. Individuals who are doing immense amount of work, resources, video packages, classes, all put together nicely for you to simply now, what? Invest in. So my challenge this morning to my young guys in front of me is invest in your religion. Seek that religion. Ask those questions. Don't simply say, oh, you know what, if it wasn't for him and her and him and her, I'd be in a different place. Because I tell you, we're in for a shock. All of those things, right, your grade 4 Dinya teacher from Eastern Madrasa won't be in your grave with you. That uncle that, you know, always has something to say to you at your center won't be in the grave with you. The cranky scholar won't be there either. So all those won't fly after a while. After a while, you have enough aql to go out and seek. Don't simply resign yourself to the fact that this is who I am. This is the level that I can achieve. No. Absolutely not. If you want to know about the religion, then seek it through the right means. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Now the cultural relativists say that this universal idea is very, very ambitious. Islam says the exact same thing. It's beautiful. This deen is beautiful. While it comes from a very, very strong, unlimited, infallible, a perfect being like Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's always room for discussion, interpretation. Allah gives you the principle, but how it applies to you is up to you. I'll expand on that a little bit later on. For example, it says, you know, fasting is wajib on you. Kutiba alaykum as-siyam. Kama kutiba ala alladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. Right? Fasting is wajib on you, just like it's been wajib on those before you, so you may be amongst the pious ones. But if you're traveling, if you're sick, for example, if you can't do it, Islam says don't fast. The principle is there. How it applies to you is relative to you. Aqimus salat, establish prayer. If you're traveling, cut it in half. If you can't stand, sit. Can't sit, lie down. Again, relativism. Now the danger is, and I'll expand on that, I keep saying that, the danger is that we think, oh, okay, how far can I take this relative nature? I said, right? What if today it's not, you know, I don't feel like praying salat altogether. I can stand, I can sit, I can bow, I can kneel, I can prostrate, but you know what? Right now it's not relative for me. I don't like it, I don't want to do it. Hijab, for example, khums, for example, taqleed. That's when we get, you know, into the idea of submission of God, and we'll talk about that, I think, in the third or fourth speech, if my memory serves me correctly. But let's understand the crux of the issue. Because when you believe and when you convince yourself that Islam doesn't have a human rights system, you begin to trickle out of the deen. On top of that, what's even more dangerous is that you actually believe the dhulm that's done, let's say, in marriages, in homes, in Yemen, for example. The dhulm done in Yemen is not done by anybody outside the religion. These are people who believe in Islam, quote unquote. It's not like Palestine, right? We can say, oh, okay, these are non-Muslims doing that. No, the Yemen battle is done by Muslims on Muslims. So now a 15, 16 on the fence of the deen says, wait a second, there's something wrong here. It must be correct. Remember Shaheed Mutahhari's point when it comes to young people. Beautiful point, and then Masad. He says that, it's beautiful. The example he gives is that of a hungry individual. Hungry individual. You get to the point where you're very, very hungry. Haven't eaten anything all day. And I don't know about you, but when I get hungry, my legs start to give out. They start to shake. It's weird. Others get a little bit hangry. Others get a little bit, tired. They get a little bit dizzy. Right? Whatever the case may be, imagine getting to the point where at this moment I'll take anything. And a plate of food is presented in front of you. And you've had nothing all day. Will you sit there and count the calories in the bread that's deep fried? I don't really like that kind of dressing on my salad. I'm not a really big rice guy. No, you will shovel that food down your throat. Because it's presented to you as being edible. Every nation, every generation had the young that were starving to believe in something. Starving to believe in something. It's up to us to present the proper plate of food for them to believe in. And right now, the problem is that they are right now looking towards the West and their blogs and their TED Talks and their 4-syllable words and their beautiful running websites and their apps and think, oh, this is a very, very delicious, attractive meal to believe in. Let's go ahead and believe in that. While meanwhile, it's hollow. The deen has everything, but we haven't presented it properly to them. They're starving. We have to present the plate in front of them. And that's what I want to do in the next 9-10 nights. Is open this up and say, look, all this discussion about human rights in Islam comes from a base of God, is built by the Ahl Bayt, and has to be applied by you and I, inshallah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And that's why these topics are important in these 10 nights. Imam Hussain did not give his life for any other reason but to uphold these principles. And if there's a difference between me and a Hindu in a julus in India, a difference between me and that Christian walking from Najaf to Karbala, the difference between me and that Sikh now serving water at the Sabil of Hussain, if there is a difference, and absolutely there is, the difference is that while he mourns and grieves and pays respect for Hussein's mission, I have to be a living example of that message. I have to be the embodiment of that message. It has to be such that when people look at you and I, they are reminded of Imam Hussain. Are we anywhere near that? God knows I'm not. Because the sacrifice is big. It's not short of moments that would destroy any individual. It's not. And what I want to remember tonight in Masa'ib is leaving Medina. They haven't even arrived in Karbala yet. Their exit from Medina itself is nothing short of heartbreaking. Because you understand how they left Medina, the status of this family. I mentioned on social media, when we understand things like Ghadir and Mubahila, we understand the level of zulm on the day of Ashura. When we understand with which respect and izzat and ihtiram this caravan left Medina, we understand that their arrival in Karbala was the beginning of the dhulm. The caravan now gets ready to go. Imam Hussain now has readied the entire qafila. Said his respective goodbyes to everybody. And one by one now they begin now to load up the luggage, load the saman, and mount people on their respective animals one by one. And the moment that I want to draw your attention to, and you're probably already there with me, is the moment when all the men had already come out, everything was loaded, and then a voice could be heard. That lower your heads, the daughter of Fatima is about to exit the home. The respect by which Bibi Zainab was mounted on her horse is well documented in history. When Zainab arrives at her respective animal, there are 4 or 5 of her princes waiting for her. They're ready to give her their knee. their hand. But she would not mount with anybody. She wanted Hussein to mount her on the horse. Now, why is that important? Because the same Zainab will mount a horse again. When? On the morning of the 11th of Muharram. They say that when the qafla now is ready to go towards Kufa and Sham, Zainab takes on the role of Hussein, the leader of the qafla, begins to mount everybody one by one. There comes a moment now where Kulsum says to Zainab, I will mount you on the horse. Zainab says, I will mount you on the horse. And one by one now they go back and forth till Zainab mounts Kulsum on the horse. And there stood the daughter of Ali by herself on the plains of Karbala. Her heart must have gone towards that moment in Safar and that moment in Rajab when they left Medina, when Ali Akbar was there, Abbas was there, Hussein was there, all of them was there. The shan, the respect by which Zainab left Medina. But this is Karbala, Zainab. Ashura is gone now. Hussein is gone. Qasim is gone. Ona Muhammad are gone. And at that moment, some reports say that she didn't look towards Hussein, but she looked towards the banks of Furat. And there lying there was the body of Abul Fazl Abbas, almost as if to say that Abbas, you promised me that so long as you were with me, this moment wouldn't arrive. But it's almost as if Abbas could talk, he would tell Shahzadi that I'm sorry, I am so much bored. If I had my arms, if I had my life, I would mount you, Shahzadi, like no other. The other time that we remember when Zainab was alone, come to the courtyard of Yazid. There comes a moment now where the qafla arrives in front of Yazid. Everybody is there, every woman, every child, Imam Sajjad. And Yazid now asked one of his companions that I heard that Hussein brought his sister with him from Medina. Yes, she did. Was she killed in Karbala or is she here amongst us? No, Yazid, she's here amongst us. I want to see her. I want to talk to her. This is the moment that Imam Sajjad says almost broke him in half. So the kids were removed. At one moment, there stood Zainab, Kulsum, Fizza, Imam Sajjad. They removed Fizza. They removed Kulsum. Sajjad said that I begged, I pleaded, let me stand beside my puppy Amma. Let me stand beside my puppy Amma. But they ripped my Mawla. They dragged my Mawla. They separated my Mawla from Zainab. 700 men in the balconies. Yazid on his number. Zainab stood there alone. The eyes of this non-mahram looking at the daughter of Ali. سيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to accept this qaleel ibadat, inshallah. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to give us that tawfiq, inshallah, to seek out the deen, to apply the deen, inshallah, to learn from this sacrifice. We ask you, Allah, to forgive the sins of our youth, elevate them to the point where they are worthy of the religion, and we ask you, Allah, to please make us worthy of the Imam's arrival, inshallah. Matim Hussain, Ya Hussain, Ya Hussain, Ya
Abbas, Abbas, Saqai Sakina, Abbas, Abbas, Saqai Sakina, Abbas, Zainab ka sahara, Abbas, Abbas, Saqai Sakina, Abbas, Abbas, Saqai Sakina, Abbas. گالوں پہ تماچے جوہی کھاتی تھی سکینہ، رو رو کے فقط تم کو بلاتی تھی سکینہ، آ جاؤ خدا را عباس عباس، سقائے سکینہ، سقائے سکینہ، تم تھے میری چادر کے محافظ میرے بھیا، تم سو گئے میدان میں میرا چھن گیا پردہ، سر کھل گیا میرا عباس عباس، سقائے سکینہ، سقائے سکینہ، سنتی ہوں کہ دریا پہ ہوا قبضہ تمہارا، اے بھیا مگر خیموں تلک پانی نہ آیا، پیاسی ہے سکینہ عباس عباس، سقائے سکینہ، سقائے سکینہ، شبیر کا سر پشت سے جب کاٹا گیا تھا، خنجر کے تلے بھائی نے 2 بار کہا تھا، آؤ میرے بھیا عباس عباس، سقائے سکینہ، سقائے سکینہ، دیکھو تو ذرا لٹ گئی سرکار حسینی، تاراج ہوا اسر کو دربار حسینی، ہم ہو گئے تنہا عباس عباس، سقائے سکینہ، عباس عباس، سقائے سکینہ، جو کام تمہارا تھا کیا میں نے وہ بھیا، ہاں شام غریبا میں حرم کا دیا پہرا، دل کہتا تھا میرا عباس عباس، سقائے سکینہ، عباس عباس، سقائے سکینہ، اللہ کسی کو بھی دکھائے نہ یہ منظر، بے پردہ بہن بھائی کا سر نو کے سینہ پر، اور بھائی بھی ایسا عباس عباس، سقائے سکینہ، عباس عباس، سقائے سکینہ، عباس عباس، زینب کا سہارا عباس عباس، سقائے سکینہ، عباس عباس، یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین یا حسین،
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. متوجه زيارة. السلام عليك يا رسول الله، السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة النساء العالمين، السلام عليك يا خديجة الكبرى، السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى، السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله الحسين وتسعة المعصومين، علي بن الحسين ومحمد بن علي وجعفر بن محمد وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد والحسن بن علي والخلف الهادي والمهدي حجتك وعلى عبادك في صيامك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
إن الله ملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر الله أكبر. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن محمد رسول الله أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين عليا حجة الله أشهد أن أمير المؤمنين وإمام المتقين عليا ولي الله. صلى. حي على الصلاة حي على الصلاة حي على الفلاح حي على الفلاح حي على خير الأمل حي على خير الأمل. الله أكبر الله أكبر. لا إله إلا الله لا إله إلا الله. إن الله ملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما.